All right, we got a bunch of spring games on tap today, an entire Saturday's worth, in fact, of spring games. We're going to talk about a few of them in this video here. I will be live this afternoon for the majority of these games. We'll probably go live about 12, I guess. I'm going to put the schedule up in a second, but you'll see Ohio State comes on at 12. You got a bunch of games starting at 1, 2, 3, 4. And Alabama's at 4. Anyway, going to be live for a large portion of the day. We'll be on YouTube starting at 12, and we'll move over to Patreon starting around 3 or 4. So the link to the Patreon page is in the description. Make sure you check it out if you haven't already. If you're already on the Patreon page, you know the deal. The link will be posted over on the Patreon page sometime around 3 or 4 o'clock. Just click the link, and we'll be live over there. YouTube at 12. All right, let's put this schedule up on the screen. Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. That's right, it's me. The rumors are true. It is Uncle Lou live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. Full day of spring games, like I said. I'm not going to talk about all of them. And, of course, I'll do some recap videos over the next couple of days based off of what we see today during these spring games. But I have a few thoughts, questions, things I'm looking for, whatever, in a few of these spring games that are coming up today. So I just want to hit some of them here real quick. North Carolina at 10 a.m., okay. Houston, ESPN Plus at 11. I'm not going to get into the whole TV deal. We already know. There's only, I think, 3, 4 maybe spring games coming on traditional TV, 2 coming on Fox, 1 today, 1 next week. That's Ohio State today, Michigan next week, Alabama on ESPN at 4. That might be the only 3 coming on traditional TV. And you got a bunch on streaming services like ESPN Plus, SEC Network Plus, whatever. Anyway, the screen sort of tells you whether or not it's coming on TV or streaming, and if so, where to find it. So I'm not going to go through them all as we scroll past here. Just going to hit some of the highlights here. Like I said, Ohio State at noon over on Fox. Now, of course, last year's quarterback, Kyle McCord, has transferred out. They brought in Will Howard. Now, I expect Will Howard to get the start there. I think that's what most people expect. Rarely do teams come out and just tell you this time of year, though, yes, this person is starting in week 1, even though, we kind of get it. It's going to be Will Howard. He had a good career before transferring to Ohio State. How well does he have a grasp of this Ryan Day offense, and what sort of effect is Chip Kelly, who, of course, Ryan Day has hired in the offseason, going to have on this offense overall, and will Will Howard, or how successfully will Will Howard be able to run that offense? Look, Ohio State's roster is loaded from top to bottom. That's almost always the case with Ohio State based off of the way they recruit, but because of how aggressive they were in the transfer portal this offseason, the expectations and pressure really have been ratcheted up to an even higher than normal level at Ohio State. And I would be the first to admit they do have a loaded roster. And it's hard to see a scenario that doesn't involve Ohio State being a part of this year's 12-team playoff. Regardless of what you think of Ohio State or Ryan Day or Will Howard or Chip Kelly or whoever associated with Ohio State, knowing that we have a 12-team playoff, and then looking at Ohio State's record every single year over the last, 10 to 15 years, how many times in the last 10 to 15 years would Ohio State have missed a 12-team playoff? 0? Maybe once? Not very often. They're likely to be into the 12-team playoff. The questions really about Ohio State are how far can they go in that playoff? Those questions won't be answered today in the spring game. But we will get our first look at Will Howard at quarterback, Chip Kelly's influence on the offense, things like that. So this is something that I am interested to see play out, not just today, but over the course of the offseason. The Ohio State game noon on Fox. Purdue on the Big Ten Network at noon. No one will be watching that. Arkansas streaming on ESPN Plus or SEC Network Plus. KJ Jefferson is transferred out. They've got a new offensive coordinator, so a lot new there for those of you that might be interested in seeing what Arkansas looks like heading into the 2024 season. Florida at 1 o'clock. This one is interesting to me because you cannot draw a straight line from spring practice to what we'll see in the fall. That's pretty well established by anybody that knows anything at all about college football, and trying to do that is foolish. However, there are some occasions where you watch a spring game and you say, barring some sort of massive roster turnover, which is a possibility now, because you got to remember, we've got another transfer portal that opens up after spring, right? So some of these rosters could be completely flipped upside down between now and the end of May. But if you remember Florida's spring game from last year, it was an absolute disaster. There was just literally nothing positive to take away from Florida's spring game last year at all. And what happened? Well, they had a terrible season. They went 5-7 and didn't make a bowl game. They had their third straight losing season in a row, their second straight losing season in a row under Billy Napier. He's back. Graham Mertz is back. But that's about it. Travis Etienne, their star running back, has transferred out. That wide receiver that they had, and I'm completely drawing a blank on his name now, which is a shame because he's really, really good. He transferred in from Arizona or Arizona State and was really good at Florida for a couple of years. He's gone. The defense has been missing in action for a couple of years at Florida. The lines of scrimmage are a big question and concern. I'm going to be curious not to compare what I see from Florida today necessarily to what I saw during the season, but last spring game. Are they more crisp offensively? Now, Graham Mertz is in his second year there. I would assume he takes a step forward, and as hard of a time as I give Florida and Graham Mertz, he did play better last year than I thought he would play. Copeland, is that his name? Ricky? Anyway, I got it. My mind is, I'm trying to remember that Florida wide receivers now, and it's somebody will type it in the comments and I'll feel like an idiot. But anyway, he doesn't have him. He doesn't have ETN. How's he going to look? Again, you can't draw a straight line from here to fall. But I remember last year after the spring games, there was a couple of teams, Florida, Colorado. I don't remember if there was a third. Anyway, you watch those spring games and they were really, really bad. Really bad. Clemson's last week was really bad. We harped on that, Florida and Colorado last offseason, how bad that spring game was. And both of those teams ended up being really bad during the season. Colorado started out winning a couple of games and people's minds were blown. Then they lost like 7 of their last 8 games and finished like whatever they were, 3-9, 4-8, something like that. Florida was 5-7. So sometimes it does matter what you see in these spring games. But anyway, I'll be curious to see how Florida looks today, 1 o'clock, streaming over on ESPN+. Georgia also streaming at 1 o'clock over on ESPN+. Not a lot to look for, really, in Georgia's spring game today. Georgia is one of the only top teams in the country that returns their head coach, their offensive coordinator, their defensive coordinator, and their starting quarterback. Not very many of the top teams can say that. You look at Texas, they do. You look at Alabama, they don't. You look at Ohio State, they don't. You look at Michigan, they don't. Washington, they don't. Oregon, they don't. Whatever team, Ole Miss. Ole Miss returns a lot of, they return head coach, coordinator, starting coordinator. Ole Miss might be on that list. Anyway, not a lot of questions really that will be answered, I don't think, today in Georgia's spring game. Now, they did lose Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers off of last year's team, but those are being replaced with known commodities. And neither of them are as good as the pieces Georgia is losing. There's not another Ladd McConkey on this team, on Georgia's team, and there's not another Brock Bowers. There are good wide receivers. There are good tight ends. There's not a Ladd McConkey. There's not a Brock Bowers. Now, Dominic Lovett has been talked about a lot this spring and how well he has looked. This will be his second year after transferring in from Mizzou for last season, and he played okay last season, and it's kind of a backup role that sort of became a starting role because of the injuries to Ladd McConkey, but he should be a lot better. Dominic Lovett, we'll see. Arian Smith, of course, is back. If he can learn how to catch the ball, that would be great. Colby Young, a transfer wide receiver from Miami, who's just a really tall, sort of outside target wide receiver. We'll see how he looks. But, Carson Beck should be fine. Travis Etienne and the running backs. A lot of times it's hard to judge running backs in a spring game. You get a lot of early whistles in a spring game. Of course, we know the quarterbacks can't even be touched, but in a lot of cases, these running backs don't have a lot of carries either, especially the ones that are expected to contribute a lot during the season. So we'll see. But I don't know that you'll know that much more about Georgia coming out of today's game than we already know, which is that they're going to be pretty good and they return a lot of their pieces from last year, and they need to find replacements for Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers. But that's at 1 o'clock. Georgia Tech at 1 o'clock. No one cares. No one will watch. Kentucky at 1 o'clock. I do want to see how Brock Vandagriff looks there. Now, I've been watching Brock Vandagriff play in spring games for 3 years as a backup at Georgia. But, of course, this is his first opportunity to be a starting quarterback. He has transferred away from Georgia to Kentucky. I don't blame him at all. I think he's a really, really good quarterback. I expect him 100% to be the starting quarterback at Kentucky this coming season, which is interesting because Georgia's first SEC game of the year this year is on the road at Kentucky. So Georgia will have to face its former backup quarterback, Brock Vandagriff. I'll be curious to see how he looks in that Kentucky offense today. Tennessee at 1 o'clock. Nico, right? That's it, really. I don't think you're going to find out that much about Tennessee's defense today in this spring game. I do have some questions about Tennessee's defense like I have every year so far under Josh Heupel. Depth, obviously, is something that they've been working on as a staff at Kentucky. And but let's just be real. Anybody that tunes into the Tennessee game today, they're tuning in to see Nico. That's it. Now, are there other things you should or could be looking for in the Tennessee game? Yes. But I guarantee you, after Tennessee's spring game today and tomorrow, the next couple of days, 99% of what people are going to talk about coming out of this Tennessee spring game is going to be Nico and how he looked. Utah at 1, Pac-12 network. Boy, that's still a thing. Unbelievable. Yeah, it is. LSU at 2 o'clock. Again, Jaden Daniels gone, but Nussmeier in. We've seen Nussmeier play a lot at LSU. I think he started some when Jaden Daniels was hurt. I know he played the entire second half of the SEC championship game 2 years ago when Jaden Daniels got hurt against UGA. He's a really good thrower of the football. He's a sort of a prototypical pocket passer with a rocket arm. He's not going to give LSU, the running around and the athleticism that they got from Jaden Daniels, but he's a really good thrower of the football. And LSU, even though they're losing some wide receivers, they always seem to have NFL caliber type wide receivers. The questions for LSU, obviously, after last year are defensive. And again, it's just harder to judge that coming out of a spring game, at least to an idiot like me, than it is the offense, right? I can watch a quarterback and see if he can complete a pass or not, right? Do his passes look good? Are they on target? Is he making the right read? Does he throw any interceptions? Like, even an idiot like me can watch a spring game and see those things, right? A lot harder, I think, to project a defense coming out of a spring game. And that's the biggest question for LSU heading into the year. Penn State, Big Ten Network at 2 o'clock. Pitt, ACC Network at 2. Virginia Tech. A lot of people really high on Virginia Tech this year. If you want to check them out, 3 o'clock on the ACC Network today, streaming on the ESPN Plus app. I don't know that they'll win the ACC, but, they were hot at the end of last season. They have the most returning production in all of college football. Their coaching staff is intact, and they don't have a very difficult schedule. So there are some reasons to be high on Virginia Tech. Are there some people out there that are maybe a little bit too high? Probably. They're probably still not on a Florida State, Clemson type of level, but it's the ACC. Anything could happen. Alabama at 4. This game comes on ESPN, and of course, this will be one of the most watched and talked about spring games. Probably the most watched and the most talked about, just because Nick Saban is gone. That's it. And Kalen DeBoer is in. They returned their quarterback, Jalen Mildew, who I don't think is very good, at least when it comes to throwing the football. And again, how much are we going to learn today about what Kalen DeBoer is going to do offensively at Alabama? I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I would be absolutely shocked if he runs the exact same offense at Bama with Jalen Milroe as he ran the last 2 years at Washington with Michael Penix. Whatever you think of Jalen Milroe, he is not the thrower that Michael Penix is. He's just not. Now, I guess glass half full, if you want to be optimistic about it, you can say, well, maybe part of the reason Michael Penix was that good is because he played in that Kalen DeBoer offense. Why can't he do that for Jalen Mildew? Maybe he can. I'm not convinced. And I don't know how much more about that we will know coming out of today's spring game. Playbooks tend to be sort of limited and dumbed down. And again, a lot of players, especially returning starter type players, don't play that much in spring games. So I don't know. I don't know how much really we will be able to gain from watching Bama's spring game today, unless we watch it and for some reason Jalen Milroe has like a Cade Klubnik type of day. Cade Klubnik last week, I did a whole video on it, wasn't great last year, but he was a first-year starter, and people said, well, he's highly rated and highly recruited, and he showed flashes last year. Surely he'll be better this year. Then we see the Clemson spring game, and the guy's still terrible. If that's the case with Mildew, then maybe there's some reason for concern coming out of the spring game. We'll see, but because everything is still so new there, it's going to be hard to sort of draw any conclusions, I think, from the Alabama spring game today. Miami comes on at 4 o'clock, again, streaming over on the ACC and ESPN Plus apps, if you want to check that out at 4. The only thing I have to say about the Miami, I think Miami's going to be really good. I think they're a contender to win the ACC. Don't know that they'll do it. They're contenders a lot of times to win the ACC, and they don't. Their talent, like everyone thought would be the case, has gotten higher and higher and higher and higher every single year under Mario Cristobal. It's time for that to start showing in terms of on-field results. They've got a new quarterback there through the transfer portal. So, of course, everybody interested to see how he looks down there today. But really, the only thing worth mentioning when it comes to the Miami spring game today is, of course, everyone knows Miami does not have their own stadium. They lease an NFL stadium from the Miami Dolphins to play 6 or 7 home games a year. So where do they play their spring games? Well, they can't afford to rent out the Dolphin Stadium for the spring game today for whatever reason. So where are they going to do it? Well, in the past, they've done it at high school stadiums, high school football stadiums. Not the case today. Miami is playing their game on the women's soccer field. That's right. And they're marketing this thing as an exclusive VIP event for the fans. What makes it exclusive? What makes it VIP? Well, there's about 500 tickets available. That's what makes it exclusive and VIP. They have literally painted football lines on the women's soccer field and put recreation department bleachers on the sidelines. And, if you're $1 million donor to the U, then you can have a seat on one of those bleachers and watch the circus known as the Miami spring game today at 4 o'clock. Ole Miss at 4. And that's it for the ones that are on TV today. So I'll be live watching all of these games today, starting at noon. If you're going to be watching some of these spring games today, or you just want to come hang out and talk some college football, come back to the channel around noon. We'll go live then for the Ohio State game. We'll stay on YouTube for the majority of these 1 o'clock games. Florida, Georgia, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, all on at 1 o'clock. We'll be keeping an eye on all of those. We can talk about all of those games. We will then transition over to Patreon for the afternoon game starting around 3 or 4. So again, there's a link to the Patreon page in the description of this video. If you want to check it out, get yourself signed up. It's $10 a month. You can come hang out with us on all the Patreon streams. We have an amazing time. If you're a Patreon member already, even if you don't want to hang out and watch the spring games this afternoon, make sure you come over to the Patreon page during the stream. Leave a comment in the comment section because, of course, we hand out wrenches on all the Patreon streams. You'll become a moderator here on the channel. All right. Appreciate everybody watching. Enjoy your Saturday, a college football Saturday, and have a good morning.